Hi, my name is Micaiah McIntyre, and I'll be doing a lecture on setting. One of the most important aspects of great literature is the intentionality of the author to make sure that each element of the written work is a meaningful contribution to the work as a whole and to the themes it addresses. One of the greatest tools that can be used to provide meaning through great intentionality is setting. The setting can also be used to create the ideal atmosphere that contributes to a desired tone the author wishes to convey. The setting of a piece of literature can convey a lot of hidden information that contributes to the meaning of the piece as a whole. This contribution to meaning by use of specific setting can be seen in the short story, Barn Burning, the poem, The Red Wheelbarrow, and the drama, The Death of a Salesman. In general, we refer to the setting as the time and place at which a story is told. For the purpose of this lecture, I'll be focusing mainly on the place and the atmosphere, though time will be mentioned briefly. Though some settings are very specific as far as time and geographical location, there are certain settings that remain more abstract. For example, the poem The Red Wheelbarrow, written by William Carlos Williams, doesn't name a specific time or location geographically, but still gives the reader a very specific setting that contributes to the meaning and tone of the poem. In the poem The Red Wheelbarrow, Williams is attempting to create a very distinct serenity with his setting. He describes the visual aspects of the setting and allow his readers to experience the fresh purity of nature. As the reader visualizes the wheelbarrow glazed in rainwater beside white chickens, the reader is aware that the wheelbarrow is sitting outdoors after rainfall. The bright red wheelbarrow, the clean white chickens, and the refreshing rainwater create a very serene environment that's almost cleansing. One of the main objectives of the poem is to provide the reader with a vivid picture, in this case, a setting. In the short story Barn Burning by William Faulkner, the setting played a major role in the development of the young boy Sardie Snopes. Initially, we meet the Snopes in a small town that seems fairly simple. The reader has very little information about the family and can only tell that they are being accused of having burned a barn down. For all we know, someone else could have burned the barn, and they could be innocent. The court which holds the trial is in a store. They decide that there isn't enough evidence and simply kick the family out of town. I know my initial opinion was unsure of whose fault it actually was, and I felt a little bit of pity for the father. However, when the family was forced to move, I began to see some major consistencies in the character of Mr. Snopes that made it very obvious that he was a very evil character. When the Snopes arrived at their new home, a new setting in the farm country, Sardie is confronted with his father's cruel and heartless attitude and actions. Upon the encounter with the wealthy farm owner in their home, Sardie witnesses his father's rude and callous interactions as he demands to see Mr. Despain. Sardie seems to notice the splendor of the home and its delicate inhabitants and the terrifying effect his father has on them. The setting of the beautiful, proper home, filled with people who showed vulnerable emotions, causes Sardie to notice the harsh contrast of his cruel, heartless father and their humbler circumstances. The change in setting really allowed Sardie to see his father's true colors and inspired his betrayal at the end of the story. Though he still mourns over the loss of his father physically and probably even the characteristics that he had thought his father had, he realizes that his father is in the wrong, and it causes him to change his perspective. So the change in setting really allows Sardie to see his father's true colors and inspires him to betray his father at the end of the story. Though he still mourns over his father's loss, Sardie really realizes that his father was a cruel and unjust man. In the play Death of a Salesman, written by Arthur Miller, we read that, quote, the action takes place in Willy Loman's house and yard and in various places he visits in New York and Boston of today, end quote. We further find out through reading that he and his family live in a claustrophobic and stuffy area that's surrounded by apartment buildings. Pretty much the opposite of what Willy really wanted for his family and his life. Because of the flashbacks that Willy has, we're able to see a stark difference between the misery of Willy's current life, including some arguments he has with his son, the depression he faces, and his delusions. All of his current miseries are set in the present time and take place in his stuffy home and in the area surrounding it. This is contrasted with almost every other happy memory that he has. The flashbacks are all either outside or somewhere else. The setting is extremely significant to the plot and the characters. The less than fancy, stuffy, and aged apartment really mirrors the internal state of Willie. He feels like his home is a letdown, and he is a letdown. When he reminisces about the big tree they used to have in their yard, he seems free. He had dreams and desires of becoming something great, but now in his old age he is broken, like many of the things in his home. Time is also a key factor in the setting to this story. It contributes to the meaning of the story. The whole drama takes place in about one day, alluding to the insignificance of Willie's life and accomplishments. Willie's whole life begins and ends for the reader in one day. Everything he was, everything he dreamed of, is summed up in just a day. This really shows and emphasizes that Willie's life was not what he wanted it to be. The setting really tells us that Willie's current emotional state, his unattained dreams, and his significant life are very evident because of this setting. Setting can play many roles in different forms of literature. For the poem that we looked at, the setting created the atmosphere that was perhaps the entire purpose of the poem. The setting is the picture the words in the poem painted. In the short story, the setting revealed the true characters of an evil man and caused a major change in the main character. Finally, in the play, the setting was a depiction of the life of a man, his fears and failures, and his inability to attain the American dream. I hope you enjoyed the lecture and were able to see a glimpse of just how important setting can be to literature.